always thought the hardest part would be watching her die. But it wasn't. It was what came after. It was the silence. The stillness of a room that had just been full of breath and pain and whispered love. It was the way her hand stayed warm for a few minutes longer than it should have, like her body hadn't quite caught on that she was gone. It was walking out of that hospital room with her wedding ring in my pocket and no idea what the hell to do next. That's what gutted me. My name's Thomas Grady. I'm 57 years old, senior project engineer at Beckett and Lorne Industrial Design. I've been with the company 28 years. I'm the guy who fixes problems, doesn't panic, doesn't guess, just keeps his head down and gets the job done. I've led builds for plants in 3 countries, overseen million-dollar retrofits, trained a dozen junior guys who now outrank me. People trust me with pressure. But nothing prepared me for that room, for watching Anna take her last breath. She was always the brave one between us, braver than she ever gave herself credit for. When the diagnosis came 6 months ago, stage 4 metastatic ovarian cancer, she didn't flinch. She blinked slow, like she was listening to someone talk about the weather, then nodded and asked the doctor how long she had. The doctor said, months, not years. Anna just thanked him. Thanked him. I stared at her like she'd grown wings. Meanwhile, I couldn't even speak. My throat was closing in, my chest tight, like grief had already moved in and started rearranging the furniture. I stayed by her side every day. My boss offered me 2 weeks off. I never went back. Didn't care. Anna needed me more than the blueprints did. She joked at first, said we could treat chemo like a spa vacation from hell. Said at least I'd finally have a reason to slow down and watch a movie with her. She even laughed the first time she threw up on me, told the nurse I was overdue for a humility check. That's who she was. Sharp, dry, beautiful, even as her body broke down around her. We met at a hardware store. That's the part no one ever believes. I was 25, fresh out of school, and she was working weekends at the register while finishing a degree in environmental science. I needed caulk. She hated the word. Told me so. Caulk is disgusting. Say it again and I'm charging you double. I laughed so hard I dropped a box of screws. Came back the next weekend, and the one after that. She finally agreed to coffee, just to shut me up. 18 months later, we were married. Just us, a courthouse, and a cheap bottle of champagne in the parking lot. We were quiet people. We didn't travel much. Never had kids, though not for lack of trying. 3 miscarriages in 5 years. She stopped talking about it after the 3rd. Just held my hand when we saw babies at the grocery store. I think we both learned to bury that ache deep where it wouldn't rot us from the inside. We had each other. And somehow, that was always enough. When she started slipping in and out of consciousness this week, I knew it was close. She'd squeeze my hand, then drift, wake up, then sleep again. I memorized her breathing pattern, counted the seconds between each inhale, terrified of the moment it might stop. Nurses came and went. Friends visited and left quietly. The room became a kind of sacred bubble, filled with the scent of her lavender lotion and the low hum of the machines. This morning she opened her eyes one last time, looked right at me. Her voice was barely audible, just a breath in the shape of words. Tom, you were my peace. I kissed her knuckles, told her I loved her, told her she didn't have to fight anymore. She smiled. Barely. And then she was gone. No gasp, no tremor, just gone. I sat there for a long time, long enough that a nurse gently asked if I wanted help calling someone. I shook my head, took Anna's ring off her finger, slipped it into my pocket. And then I walked out. The hallway was bright, too bright. The floors shined like a showroom. Someone was laughing at the end of the corridor. The absurdity of it. I wanted to scream. Didn't they know what just happened? Didn't they feel the vacuum she left behind? I stumbled outside into the hospital courtyard, found a bench under a blooming dogwood and collapsed onto it. My hands were trembling, my shirt damp with tears. I sat there breathing in broken rhythms, staring at the cracks in the pavement. That's when I heard them. Two nurses just a few feet away, sipping coffee and talking in hushed tones. One of them said, "Room 418. You know the one who just passed?" I heard she had another family, a son. Nobody even knew. I didn't move. My mind latched onto their voices like a drowning man grabbing a rope. Room 418. That was Anna's room. Another family? A son? My breath caught in my throat. I turned slowly, not wanting to be noticed. The nurses walked away, still chatting, unaware they'd just dropped a bomb on what was left of my world. I sat there, frozen, heart racing, wondering who the hell I had just said goodbye to. I didn't leave that bench for over an hour, just sat there, hunched over, trying to make sense of what I'd heard, trying not to jump to conclusions. But how could I not? Room 418, a son, another family. The nurses hadn't been talking about someone else. They'd been talking about Anna. I should have gotten up, asked them what they meant, demanded it even. But I didn't. I couldn't. My legs wouldn't work, and my mind was already racing down a hallway that had no lights and no end. My wife, my Anna, was gone, and now I didn't even know who she really was. I walked back inside like a man underwater. Number detached. The nurse at the front desk gave me a gentle smile, said they'd packed Anna's things, and I could pick them up any time. I nodded, not really hearing. I followed her to a small gray room and took the plastic tub she offered me. It felt too light for a life. A sweater, a paperback, her wedding ring box, her lotion, a half-empty journal, and an envelope. Sealed. Thick. The only thing written on the front were the initials, KM. I stared at it so long the nurse asked if I needed a moment. I shook my head and muttered something about traffic. Then I left. The drive home felt surreal. The sun was too bright. Every red light felt like a personal insult. I kept glancing at the passenger seat, expecting to see her there, even though I'd just watched her die. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. I kept hearing her voice in my head. That last breath, that last look. You were my peace. So why the hell did she keep something like this from me? Our house felt colder than I remembered, not just in temperature, but in presence. I dropped the tub on the entryway table and walked straight into our bedroom. Her scent was still on the pillows. The dresser was neat, the way she always kept it, except for the top drawer, which I opened without thinking. I started digging, not angrily, just searching. Slowly, methodically, one drawer after another. I flipped through old birthday cards, faded receipts, prescriptions, post-it notes, with scribbled thoughts. Then, behind a framed picture of us on the beach, Anna in that ridiculous sun hat she loved, there it was, a second envelope. This one wasn't addressed to KM. It was addressed to me. Just 4 words, written in her tidy cursive. If something happens to me. My throat closed up. I didn't open it right away, just held it in my lap, staring at our photo like it might offer an explanation. Then I slid my thumb under the seal and unfolded the letter. It wasn't long. Tom, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you everything, but I didn't know how. And by the time I found the words, I didn't have the time. Before I met you, when I was just 18, I had a baby, a boy. His name was Kyle. I wasn't ready. My family wasn't supportive. They made me choose, and I chose adoption. I never stopped thinking about him, but I locked it away and told myself it was another life. Then I met you. You were so good, so steady. I didn't want to bring the pain into what we had, but I always kept track of him as best I could. There's a town called Pine Hollow. That's where I last knew he lived. Please don't be angry. I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to love both parts of my life out loud. Anna. I read it twice. Then a third time. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too stunned, too hollowed out. I sat there on the edge of our bed, the walls of our life closing in, trying to understand how something so enormous could have been kept from me for all these years. I thought back to the hospital, to the times during treatment when she seemed far away. Not physically, emotionally, like she was somewhere else, even when I was holding her hand. I thought of the photograph on her nightstand, the one I'd never recognized. A little boy, maybe 4 or 5, sitting on the edge of a fountain. She always said it was a cousin's kid. I'd believed her, because I never had a reason not to. And now? Now I didn't know what to believe. My marriage hadn't felt like a lie. It had been real, through and through. But there was this door she'd never let me open, and now she was gone, and I was standing in front of it with the key in my hand. Pine Hollow. I didn't know where it was yet, didn't know if the address still existed, or if Kyle was still there, or if he even knew Anna was gone. But I knew one thing. I had to find out. I folded the letter slowly, like I was folding up a piece of myself. Then I looked at the envelope marked KM, the one from the hospital box, and I started to wonder. Had she written him too? Had she tried, in her own quiet way, to bridge the past before it was too late? I placed both envelopes side by side on the table, the names inked in her hand. One for me, one for him. And I realized this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I left before sunrise. Couldn't sleep anyway. Every corner of the house felt haunted. Not by ghosts, but by the things I never asked, and the truths she never told. The envelope sat on the passenger seat, folded neatly inside a leather notebook. Pine Hollow. I had to keep saying the name out loud, just to remind myself this was real. Not a dream, not a movie, just me. Driving through the Tennessee backroads with a steering wheel in my hands and a question in my gut. The sun came up over the hills, slow and warm, like it didn't care that the world had shifted beneath my feet. Wildflowers lined the edges of the 2-lane road. Rusted mailboxes leaned crookedly against gravel driveways, and every few miles, a white steeple poked up through the trees, like a whisper from a time before mine. Pine Hollow wasn't even a town so much as a cluster of buildings, politely pretending to be one. A diner, a gas station, a barber shop with a barber pole that actually spun. I parked in front of the only church in sight, a small red brick building with a faded wooden sign that read, Hope Baptist, established, Ayratu Torlayratu Narpatu Are. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped out, heart hammering. I didn't know what I expected. A locked door, a dead end, a bolt of clarity. The door creaked when I opened it. Inside it smelled like lemon oil and old pews. The sanctuary was empty, but I could hear faint shuffling coming from a side hallway. I followed the sound until I found a man in his 70s adjusting hymnals on a shelf. He turned as I approached, wiping his hands on a handkerchief. "You lost, son?" "No," I said, voice rough, looking for answers, actually. He squinted at me, then offered a kind smile. "We all are. Depends what kind you're chasing." I introduced myself, told him my wife's name, Anna, said she'd been here when she was 17. I didn't know what I was expecting. Confusion? A shake of the head? Instead, his eyes widened. Anna Ridgway? I nodded slowly. That was her maiden name. I remember her, he said quietly. Barely more than a girl, scared out of her mind. She showed up on our porch late one night, didn't even knock, just sat on the steps crying. My wife found her in the morning, and we took her in until the arrangements were made. Arrangements. He exhaled through his nose. Adoption. Back then, families didn't talk about things like that. Her parents wouldn't take her home pregnant, said it'd ruin them socially. So they handled it privately. Church stepped in to help. She never told me any of that, I said. She said she had a child, but she didn't say how or who helped. The old man nodded slowly, eyes heavy with memory. She wouldn't have. She was ashamed, but not because of what she did, because of what they made her give up. She wanted to keep him. You could tell. She cried the whole way through, even asked to hold him for just 1 minute. I remember that. Just 1 minute. And then he was gone. I swallowed hard. Do you know where he went? No names were exchanged, he said. It was closed, completely sealed. That was the deal. That's how it worked back then. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine it. Anna, 17 and terrified, being told she wasn't allowed to love her own child. The woman I knew was strong, but I saw now that her strength had teeth. It had been born from something brutal. Do you know anyone who might know more? I asked. Anyone who was involved? He tilted his head. You might try Lila Morgan. She was the social worker assigned to Anna's case. Retired now, but she still lives out by the quarry. You're lucky, actually. Most folks who leave here never come back. But Lila stuck around. He scribbled her address on the back of a donation envelope and handed it to me. I thanked him, and before I left, he touched my shoulder gently. Your wife. She loved that boy. She didn't give him up easily. I nodded, throat too tight to speak. Lila's house sat just beyond the edge of town, tucked behind a curtain of pines and flowering dogwoods. The porch sagged a little in the middle, and wind chimes tinkled above the door. When I knocked, a woman in her late 70s answered, gray hair braided neatly down her back, sharp blue eyes peering over reading glasses. You must be Anna's husband, she said before I could speak. Come in. Her living room smelled like fresh bread and pine cleaner. Bookshelves lined the walls. She motioned for me to sit and poured 2 cups of coffee. She always said you were quiet, Leela said. Strong, not pushy. I gave her a tight smile. I'm not here to cause problems. I need to know the truth. She was one of the good ones, Lila said. Didn't deserve what happened. Her parents were cold. They wanted it over with. I tried to fight for her to have a say, but the law was the law. Still is in some ways. Did she ever try to find him? I asked. She couldn't, Lila said. Records were sealed, but she made one request when she signed the papers. She asked that when he turned 18, he be told her name, her real name, in case he wanted to find her. And did he? Layla looked at me for a long time. I think so. Once. A man came by a few years ago asking about a woman named Anna Ridgway. Said he didn't have much to go on. Just a name and a vague town connection. I told him I didn't know where she was. She'd already married by then, changed her name. I didn't connect the dots until after he left. Do you remember his name? She reached into a drawer and pulled out an old note. Kyle Matthews. That's what he told me. My heart stopped. Kyle, I said. That was the name she wrote in the letter. Lila smiled sadly. Then he's out there, looking, just like you. For the first time in days, something stirred in me. Not peace, not yet, but purpose. I was going to find him. It took me 2 days to track him down. Lila's note, scribbled on the back of an old grocery list, had just enough to go on. Kyle Matthews, Lexington, Kentucky. She said he mentioned working construction, maybe cabinetry. That was all. I called every number listed under that name, within 50 miles. Most led to dead ends, voicemails or confused voices on the other end, who didn't know an Anna Ridgway and didn't care to. But one man, a receptionist at a local cabinetry business, paused. Kyle Matthews. He works here, yeah, but he's out on site today. Can I take a message? I gave him my name, my number, said it was important. Then hung up and stared at the phone like it owed me something. The next morning, I got a call back. Tom Grady? The voice was cautious, young but tired. You left a message about Anna Ridgway? My heart caught. Yes. A long silence. Who are you? I told him I wasn't ready to answer that on the phone, but that I needed to see him, in person, face to face. He gave me an address, said he'd be home after 6, didn't promise he'd open the door. By 5, I was already parked across the street. The house was a small red brick single-story with a basketball hoop leaning slightly over the driveway. A rusted blue pickup sat in front. There were flower beds along the walkway, half planted. It looked like a life being built, piece by piece. I sat in my car and stared at the photo I'd brought with me. Anna in her 30s, standing on our back porch, smiling at something I'd said. That half smile of hers, the one she gave when she didn't want to admit she found you funny. The wind had caught a strand of her hair, just as I snapped it, and her eyes. God, her eyes. I didn't know how I was going to do this. I stepped out of the car and walked to the door like it might explode under my feet. My pulse was hammering in my ears. I raised my hand and knocked. The door opened a few seconds later. He looked almost exactly like her. Kyle Matthews stood maybe 6'1", lean, dark blonde hair, swept carelessly to the side, a work shirt streaked with sawdust, calloused hands, and his eyes, those same piercing blue eyes I'd looked into every morning for 30 years. He stared at me with a look that bordered on suspicion. You're Grady? I nodded, struggling to find my voice. Tom Grady. I was Anna's husband. His brows pulled together, and I saw the flash of recognition, of something heavier than confusion. She passed last week, I said softly. I'm sorry to come like this, but I needed to meet you. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stepped aside. Come in. The living room was quiet, neat, minimal, a man who didn't collect much and maybe didn't have many to collect with. He gestured for me to sit, and I did. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled the photo from my pocket and held it out. This was her, a few years ago. He took it slowly. His fingers hovered over the edges like it was a relic he wasn't allowed to touch. She was beautiful, he murmured. I nodded. She always was. She was your birth mother. Yes. Kyle closed his eyes for a moment. I tried to find her once, few years back. All I had was a name and the town they said she was from. I ran into a wall. No one would tell me anything. I think she didn't know you'd come looking, I said. Or maybe she did and didn't know how to face it. She left me a letter, told me about you, said you were the one thing she regretted leaving behind. He exhaled slowly and dropped into the armchair across from me. Did she ever talk about me? The question hit me like a brick to the chest. Not directly, I admitted, but she carried you, quietly. I see it now, in the way she looked at certain photos, the way her voice would go quiet when we passed a baby store, the way she'd hold her breath whenever a boy your age walked by. He ran a hand through his hair, staring at the floor. I used to dream about her, not what she looked like, just what she might say if she saw me, if she'd care. She cared, I said, leaning forward. She cared more than I think she could bear to say, and when she was dying, I think it broke her in half. Kyle's jaw clenched, and I saw the same stubbornness Anna carried, emotion tucked behind bone and pride. I never knew why she gave me up, he said. She was 17, I said. Her family gave her no choice, but she made the agency promise you'd be told her name when you turned 18. They didn't. I felt the anger rise in me. Anna had done what she could. The system had failed them both. I'm sorry, I whispered. He nodded once, then twice, eyes still on the photo in his lap. Did she say anything else about me? I swallowed hard. The room was too quiet. She wanted me to find you. Kyle looked up at me, the weight in his gaze. It was like staring at her all over again. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't the only one mourning her. I had lost a wife, but he'd lost a mother he never got to meet. I didn't rush it. I gave Kyle time. After that first conversation, we sat for a while in his quiet little living room, barely speaking. There wasn't much left to say. Grief has a way of crowding out words, and when it's shared, sometimes silence feels holier than anything spoken. Before I left that night, I told him I'd be back in a few days. I wanted to show him something of hers. 3 mornings later, I was waiting in my driveway as he pulled up in that dented blue pickup. He stepped out slowly, scanning the house like he was trying to picture her there. Maybe he was. Hell, I did that for weeks after she died. Stood in doorways, tracing her laughter through empty rooms. This was hers? He asked. I nodded. Every inch. The house felt different with him inside. Not haunted, not empty, just changed, as if it had been holding its breath. I showed him the kitchen first, where she used to hum to herself while making coffee. Then the garden she never quite got to finish, even though she planned it every spring, like this year would be the one it finally bloomed. But it was the living room that stopped him. The rocking chair sat by the window, bathed in a spill of golden morning light. She used to call it her thinking spot. She read there, cried there, folded laundry, paid bills, stared out at nothing for hours with a cup of tea she never drank. She wouldn't let me get rid of it, I said quietly, stepping closer. Even when it started to splinter, said the creak was part of its charm. Kyle walked over and ran his hand along the armrest, his fingers ghosting over grooves she'd worn into the wood. I used to wonder if she ever sat still, he said, if she liked quiet. I like quiet. I looked at him. She loved it. Said silence was the only thing that ever answered back. We didn't speak for a minute or two. Just stood there in that light, listening to the chair groan gently as it rocked from Kyle's touch. Then I said, "There's something else I want to show you." I led him down the hall to our bedroom. Everything was still how she left it. Carefully folded sweaters, a stack of books with bookmarks wedged in the middle, an old jewelry box tucked into the top drawer. I opened it slowly and lifted the tray. Beneath it, folded so small it almost disappeared, was an envelope. His name was written on the front in her handwriting. Kyle. I handed it to him without a word. He sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at it, thumb running over the crease. "Are you sure I should?" "She wrote it for you." He opened it slowly. The paper crackled like something sacred. Then he cleared his throat and began to read aloud, voice shaking. Kyle, I never stopped thinking about you. I never wanted to leave you. I just wasn't given a choice. I tried to find you when I was older, but the records were sealed. Every birthday, I lit a candle. Every year, I whispered your name, even when I wasn't sure I was allowed to say it. I kept a photo of you by my bed. I don't know what kind of life you've had, or what you've been told about why I gave you up. But please believe this. I loved you. I never stopped. You were never a mistake. You were my first real love. I hope someday this letter finds its way to you. And if it does, I hope you know you were wanted. Always. Love, Mom. He finished reading and stared at the letter like it might vanish if he blinked. Then he crumpled over, elbows on his knees, shoulders shaking with quiet, gut-deep sobs. I sat beside him and didn't say a word, just laid a hand on his back and let the grief come. He wasn't crying for her the way I had. He was crying for everything he never got to have. After a while, we moved back to the porch. The sun was going down, bleeding orange across the sky. We sat in silence, him in the rocker, me in the chair beside it. The same way she and I used to sit every evening, like clockwork. Kyle stared out at the trees. She used to watch the fireflies come out, I said. He smiled faintly. I used to chase them as a kid, tried to catch one in my lunchbox. I glanced at him, and for a second, just a second, it was like I saw her, not just in his face, but in the stillness between us, in the way the air felt full, not empty. She would have liked you, I said. Hell, she would have loved you. He didn't answer right away, just rocked gently, the wood creaking like it remembered her. After a long pause, he whispered, "Maybe I'll stay a while." The sun dipped lower. The fireflies came out, just like they always did. And we watched them dance across the yard, two men joined by a woman they both loved in ways that were different, but no less true. I thought her story ended in that hospital room, but it didn't. She left me with a son, with something new. Maybe healing doesn't mean forgetting. Maybe it just means opening the door again.